Morning again to you. Well, the King and the Prime Minister are in Dubai for the COP28 summit, where the King has told world leaders that the hope of the world rests on decisions taken by them at this UN summit. The UN Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, addressed the COP climate summit and gave an impassioned speech about the need to tackle the climate crisis.
We cannot save a burning planet via fire holes of fossil fuels. We must accelerate a just, equitable transition to renewables. The science is clear. The 1.5-degree limit is only possible if we ultimately stop burning all fossil fuels. Not reduce, not abate, phase out with a clear time frame aligned with 1.5 degrees.
Dealing with this is a job for us all. Change will come by working together and making it easier to embrace decisions that will sustain our world, rather than carry on as though there are no limits or as though our actions have no consequences. As you gather, ladies and gentlemen, for these critical negotiations, the hope of the world rests on the decisions we must take.
Well, our science and technology editor, Tom Clark, is at the conference for us now. And Tom, it's interesting, the King spoke about the landmark moment of hope and optimism within the climate world at COP21 in Paris. Of course, we're on to COP28 now. Was there an implicit suggestion there that the COPs in between have perhaps underwhelmed and that this one critically has to step up to the mark?
I mean, I think it's more of a suggestion that it's taken a long time, arguably, to not get very far. This COP is about checking. They talk about the stock take. That's the big focus of this climate summit, on how far we've got since Paris. And you look at what's happened to global emissions, they're higher than they have ever been. They haven't come down. The commitments to get there are no way near the amount that we will need to have any hope of getting there. So it's more of a comment on the fact we've got to move an awful lot faster. There's been a lot going on in the interim, though, and yes, there was a suggestion that not much is happening. They weren't as glamorous or important, those climate summits, but behind the scenes, a lot of deals are being done. A significant advance here at the summit yesterday was this fund for loss and damage for poor countries. That was a big deal. That's going to motivate a lot of people here to come to agreements. But don't forget, we are here in an oil-rich state, look around us, it's possible to say things pretty much are carrying on as they are right now, and the King and Antonio Guterres making it clear that they can't forever. Yep, the UK's here. It's going to try and inject some of its own diplomacy on this. There was some criticism of the UK for not, taking things serious enough, but they fielded a pretty big team here. They've got to make up for the rhetoric that they've been putting out about climate change at home, however. And a few moments ago, I caught up with David Cameron, who is here as Foreign Secretary, to find out how much work the UK's really got to do to re-establish our leadership position. Mr. Cameron, Sky News, just wanted to quickly ask you, do we have our work cut out now to re-establish our reputation as a leader?
We've got an unbelievably strong record.
The rhetoric doesn't
never mind
that.
the rhetoric. We have cut carbon emissions by 50%. That's faster than any major country, and our ambition for the next period is again faster than any major country. So if you look at the results and you look at what we've committed to, I think we are absolutely a leader on climate change.
The Prime Minister calls out eco-zealots at a climate summit? So the government, Mr. Cameron is right, they have fielded a pretty big diplomatic team here. We are coming, the UK, with some new money for things like forest protection. That's really important. But when he says forget about the rhetoric, I don't think people at this summit are going to be able to forget about some of the tone of the language coming out of number 10 recently about how we don't want to impose environmental policies on people. We don't want people to pay too much. That has gone down not particularly well amongst many of the delegates here who are keen to persuade their government to be more ambitious, and they can turn to the UK and say, well, look, they can be a bit equivocal about it sometimes. So I think they've got a little bit more work to do behind the scenes to try and put that diplomatic position that Mr. Cameron was trying to put to me there and convince other people that that's really what they're talking about.
Tom, great stuff. Thanks so much for that perspective. And let's get another perspective, particularly on the political side of things, for the Prime Minister, who's been speaking to reporters in Dubai ahead of COP28. He was asked who he meant when he said he was not in hock to ideological zealots over climate change, and this was his response.
Perhaps the people protesting outside my house most recently, but there are people who think that we should get to net zero without any regard to the cost on ordinary families. I don't think that's right. I think we've got to be cognizant of the impact of this on ordinary families up and down the country. We have got an incredible track record in decarbonising in the UK, faster than any other major economy. We should be really proud of that, and I'll be proud of that record at my meetings later today. So we can get to net zero, but we can do so in a more realistic, proportionate way.
Our political correspondent Rob Powell joins me now. And Rob, obviously there'll be some reaction and pushback to that sort of angle amongst people who are pro-environment at the very clearly pro-progress on the environment at the summit. What about domestically? How is this pivot that he made 6 months or so ago playing out? And of course, Sir Keir Starmer from Labour is there as well, leading another delegation, presumably trying to highlight the difference they have in opinion and policy on this area.
Well, there is a difference in opinion within the Conservative Party on this. There are some that welcomed the weakening of some of those green pledges a couple of months ago. I think they felt it was the right response, especially after taking unexpectedly that by-election on the back of the ULEZ emissions charge row. But there are others that believe that this shows the UK backing away from these issues on the global stage. For instance, Rishi Sunak's former Environment Minister, Lord Goldsmith, said yesterday, just as Rishi Sunak was heading here to COP, that he felt that recent policy changes meant that the UK wasn't viewed as a serious and reliable partner on the world stage anymore, both amongst allies and also developing nations across the Commonwealth. Now, we're on the plane with Rishi Sunak flying here to Dubai overnight, and we're able to put that to him, and he made a very similar point that you just heard then. He pointed at some of the commissions around emissions reductions and UK technology and said, look, more broadly, he felt that the UK was still a world leader here. I think this is, though, trying to sort of contrast and reconcile the global politics with the domestic politics and party management. Yes, Sir Keir Starmer is here. He's here today as well, the exact same day. What Labour say the point of that is fundamentally they believe it to be in the national interest, that given that there will be an election in the next year or so, Labour needs to essentially be making these contacts and talking about Britain on the world stage. And I think the message they want to send out is that if Labour do form the next government, they want to see Britain back on the global stage once again. But it's going to be a whistle-stop tour for the Prime Minister today. He's only in Dubai for the day today, leaves later this evening. He's got a series of bilateral meetings and other more informal meetings with world leaders as well. Yes, to discuss climate change, but also to talk about the Middle East and what is going on in Israel and Gaza as well.